Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So welcome everybody to our Friday legislative update. Once again, we are waiting for a budget. So instead of our regular legislative update, we've decided to kind of shift, and we are talking about issues that our members care about. I want to thank everybody for joining us at Secular AZ today. We are a 501c3 organization focused on protecting the Constitution and the separation of church and state for over a decade. This week, the House Ways and Means Committee passed yet another voucher expansion, despite the fact that the majority of voters have weighed in on this topic time and time again. A quick reminder that these vouchers only cover about half of the tuition for private schools, which means that they're essentially a down payment for wealthy families who are already planning on sending their kids to private schools. Our taxes are being used to subsidize the wealthy's decision to send their children to private schools. Leadership at the legislature likes to accuse public schools and educators of indoctrination, but here is the pledge that students must recite to the Christian flag every day at Phoenix Christian Preparatory. It says, "I pledge allegiance to the Christian flag and to the Savior for whose kingdom it stands, one Savior, crucified, risen, and coming again with life and liberty for all who believe." So that's where our taxpayer dollars are going. There's a lot of other things in the student handbook that you can find for yourself, but if you're not okay with this, perhaps you'll consider joining our organization, because we are your voice at the Capitol to combat this kind of stuff. So the leadership in the AZ Ledge wants to increase taxpayer funding for the wealthy to make a down payment on their kids' school while depriving public schools of the funding that they so desperately need. So little call to action: if you live in Michelle Udall's district, the old 25, or Joel John's district, the old LD4, please reach out to them and make your voice heard. But by all means, everybody can reach out to these state representatives and senators. So today, I am very excited about our guests, but I truly wish their organization didn't have to exist. But this is America after all. As most of you know, there was yet another mass shooting yesterday in a church in Alabama, and to date, there have been 284 mass shootings in America in this year alone, and we're not even finished with June. As of today, 20,110 people have died from a firearm, and it is now the leading cause of death in children in the United States. And I have a link here from an organization, gunviolencearchive.org, that we will put into the chat so that you can access that information. One of the things that kind of struck me as I was looking through it were all the injuries. And I think of how those injuries will affect those people, those children, those families for the rest of their lives. Moms Demand Action is a grassroots movement of Americans fighting for public safety measures that can protect people from gun violence. We pass stronger gun laws and work to close the loopholes that jeopardize the safety of families. They also work in their own communities with business leaders to encourage a culture of responsible gun ownership. And they know that gun violence is preventable, and they're committed to doing what it takes to keep families safe. So today I have Ann Thompson. And I want to make sure I say your name right. Is it Marie Turley?
No, although a lot of people call me that in the past. It's Thurl, rhymes with girl.
Oh, Thurl. Okay, I've been mispronouncing it all this time. So Marie Thurl and Ann Thompson of Arizona's chapter of Moms Demand Action. So let's go ahead and we'll start with you, Ann. Would you go ahead and just kind of introduce yourself and tell everybody how and why you got involved with Moms Demand Action?
Yes, I'm Ann Thompson. I am a volunteer for Moms Demand Action, the Phoenix chapter. And I've been involved with moms off and on since Sandy Hook occurred. And I've gotten more involved in the last few years. And in February, I took on the role of the legislative lead for the Phoenix chapter, which Marie kind of twisted my arm to do. But I have gotten more and more interested in the legislature since I've been unfortunately exposed to them in the last couple of years. And I just started this legislative work in February of this year. I help our state legislative lead monitor the state legislature's moves regarding gun safety laws and communicate with legislators. I am not adept at sharing screens or slides, and so you will only hear boring me talking about some of my experiences and about some of the laws that we deal with and that we have been trying to improve or to shoot down, some of the bills that we've tried to shoot down. So do you want me to go ahead now or to talk?
Let's go ahead first and have Marie. Why don't you just introduce yourself as well and talk a little bit why and how you got involved with Moms Demand.
Okay, cool. So I joined Moms Demand Action in 2018 after the shooting at Parkland because I just felt like I couldn't sit by as a mom and do nothing because if something happened to one of my children, I didn't want to feel like I didn't try to stop it. I am also a retired physician. And for those of you who knew me as the Phoenix local group lead for the last 3 years, I've recently, this year, transitioned to the Arizona elections lead because as Anne will soon talk about, I am very sick of fighting the same bills year after year after year. And I would like a gun sense majority in our state legislature.
Well, and because the legislature year after year, refuses to really consider any of these common sense gun measures. One thing I want to talk about is what you've done at the school board level, because when I served in the Creighton School District, we were able to pass the common sense gun measure that you all had. So where did that idea come from? And how many school districts have you been able to get to sign on to it, if you have those numbers?
Okay, so I have them. So we were going really well in the beginning of 2020. So Tucson School Board, Phoenix Union High School District, Creighton. Why am I blanking on the other one? I want to say Roosevelt, but I might not be right. Arizona School for the Arts. And then our work kind of stalled for a while, but we've recently restarted with the Scottsdale School Board, Scottsdale Unified School Board. So different schools take different approaches. So for example, with the Phoenix Union High School District, not only did they pass the resolution, they've also included a parent acknowledgement in their family handbook that parents have to acknowledge that they were notified of the safe storage recommendation. So that's really good. At the Scottsdale Unified, what they did is they did it as a suicide prevention directive. So it's a directive that's now encoded where when a student is identified at risk, the family has to receive the information on safe storage. Oh, and so when we get to elections, I'll show you people. So in the past, we haven't given the gun sense candidate distinction to school people at the local level, but this year we've expanded the program to include local levels, and people running for school boards is one of the primary groups that we'd like to be able to support.
Okay, so let's just let you two get right into it and talk about the work that you've been doing. Feel free to share any slides that you want with the audience, and I'm just going to kind of sit back and let you run the show.
Okay, well, I think I will start to talk about the Arizona laws and some of my experiences with watching the legislature. And then we'll go on to Marie, who will talk about how we need to improve the state legislature. So the Arizona gun laws are pretty abysmal. We have among the worst, the weakest firearm laws in the United States. And we are rated by Everytown, which is sort of the umbrella organization for Moms Demand Action, as 43rd among the 50 states for gun safety laws. Some of the good laws we have are, first, we don't allow guns on college campuses, but this year there was a bill by Republicans to allow concealed carry of weapons on campuses. So far it has stalled, and we hope that it has died. This was ridiculous, and the State Board of Regents, in addition to the chief of police for ASU, were very firm in opposing this. Another good law we have is no guns in K through 12 schools. But this year, the Republicans once again tried to pass a bill to allow loaded guns in school parking lots. And we hope that this apparently could pop up again this month, but I think that it probably won't. And I would especially hope it wouldn't after what happened at Uvalde, Texas. Then we do have a law that guns cannot be owned by people who have been committed with severe mental illness. We also have a law that convicted stalkers can be prohibited from owning guns. But here's the bad. We have a high firearm death rate, especially when it comes to intimate partner homicide. And we repealed our concealed weapons permitting requirement, which in 2021 required people to take classes, including in anger management, and had someone see if they were competent in using a gun, have a law enforcement person to check that. But in 2021, we passed a law that allowed anyone over 21 to get a permit, and the rules to get the requirements to get the permit are very, very loose. It has gone down to something like it only takes a few hours. You can do it all online. Here are the other bad laws. And if you went to last Sunday's Community Engagement Beyond Voting CEBV meeting, you heard one of our colleague volunteers, Meg Pradelt, who's a Moms Demand Action volunteer from the Tucson area. She outlaid these terrible facts. There's no state law requiring gun owners or purchasers to obtain a license or permit. There is no state law requiring firemen to be registered. In fact, cities, towns, and counties are prohibited from requiring or maintaining any record that would identify a person who owns, sells, or transfers a firearm. And there's a law against turning in your firearms to law enforcement if you want to get rid of your gun. There's no limit on the number of firearms that can be purchased at one time. There's no waiting period on firearm sale. There is no law requiring the reporting of lost or stolen firearms. And open carry is allowed in public with no requirement for a holster or anything like that. And guns may be carried in plain view in a vehicle. The weaknesses in the permitted concealed carry laws are a special concern for Meg, and they should be for all of us. And I'll repeat that there was a bill to allow people with permits to conceal carry to be allowed on state colleges and university campuses, which is a terrible idea. There are so many, college times are often fraught with emotion, sometimes depression, lots of emotional ups and downs. And allowing someone to carry a concealed weapon and just have it at use, even if they think they're protecting someone, is horrible and just would lead to tragedy. Another concealed carry bill that we fight against every year is allowing people to carry concealed weapons in public places like libraries, museums, schools, zoos, community centers, festivals, etc. I used to be a librarian a long time ago, and there could be fights in a public library. There are sometimes people who are a little emotionally disturbed who retreat to libraries for comfort and reading and just being by themselves. And I could easily see someone getting into a fight with someone like that, or anything could happen like that. Now there is a suggestion, well, that they can just, they can have metal detectors in the library so that you can't come in with a gun. Well, then you have to spend thousands of dollars to do that. And it's crazy. It's just, again, part of this crazy idea of guns everywhere, and that we should be afraid of our fellow citizens and always carry a gun in case we get in trouble.
I just want to ask a question
Yeah.
real quick, because some of the things that you were saying, I was just kind of jotting them down. So again, the party that often says they're the party of local control, you're saying that they have prohibited municipalities, counties, cities from implementing any kind of common sense gun measures in their own spaces. And yeah, go ahead.
Tucson actually rebelled against that and said that they would allow, well, Tucson rebelled against, you couldn't turn in guns. And they allowed that for a while, but then they stopped it last year, I think.
That just boggles my mind. Like, if somebody wants to get rid of their guns for whatever reason, it makes the most sense to hand them off to somebody who would know not only
Destroy them, or yeah.
yeah, that's just crazy making indeed. You said there's no limit to the guns that people can purchase at one time. You
Right.
said that there's no waiting period.
Mhm.
I mean, is this because these folks are just completely beholden to the NRA?
Yes, yes. I used to be very more open-minded about this, and well, these are just people who are rural people and want to, and are used to having guns to protect themselves. And yes, there's still some people like that, maybe some legislators, but they are beholden to the NRA. And there's another group called the Arizona Civil Defense League, which is a constant thorn in our side. And they always have lobbyists to come and testify at committee meetings about how we cannot change the Second Amendment rights for people in any way, shape, or form. And the NRA also always has lobbyists, usually a more polished lobbyists than the Arizona Civil Defense League has. And the other black humor about this is that the legislators I believe, it looks like they don't even really know what's in the bill, and they will let the lobbyists, oh, I'll have Chuck here explain it for me. Can talk about that a little more? And it's clear that these are written by Second Amendment gun rights organizations, primarily the NRA and possibly the AZCDL. And it is all for supporting gun manufacturers as well. It's not just these rights groups, it's to make more business for these groups. And it's completely immoral, in my opinion.
Well, and even there was a bill that was about, not that you can't limit. So let's say that you have a company that, firearms are part of it. Landlords now, this is my understanding of this bill, and I can't remember the number of it, but landlords cannot discriminate. They have to rent to people in that kind of industry. Do I have that correct? And did that bill make it all the way through?
I didn't think that was this year. Marie, do you?
There were some bills that the state couldn't discriminate against any company that sold firearms or ammunition. But unlike last year, 2021, there were bills that got through. At this point, there's no bill that we've opposed that's made it through. Of course, it's not over yet, but at this point, despite a record number of bills that we were opposing, none made it through. And that's in part thanks to the work that Ann and Teresa have been doing to organize us.
Okay, I'm sorry for interrupting. Go ahead, Ann, I'm sorry.
And help from other people too. And there's a wonderful volunteer named Dana Allman, who is a veteran. She was a colonel in the Army, I think. She's now retired from that, although she isn't very old. And she is a mom. And she is a graduate of West Point. And she was a real hero. She came to testify in person a number of times from the Tucson area. And I'm delighted to say that she's now running for the state legislature for representative. And so she was a big help. I'd also like to mention Jen Longden and Daniel Hernandez, both representatives who try every year to get good bills into law, and they're constantly rebuffed. Speaker Rusty Bowers held back all but two of the bills they tried to pass. The two that did get assigned to committee were red flag warning bills. It was assigned to a committee, but then it was never discussed. So then the other one was to make safe storage of firearms, to make those devices tax-free. And that never got a hearing in the Ways and Means Committee, even though it had been assigned to that. But the rest of the bills, like a 3-day waiting period from purchasing a firearm, closing background check loopholes, maybe trying to have healthcare providers and pediatrics inform those workers to inform parents about gun safety and safe storage, et cetera, et cetera. Those were not ever assigned to committee, so they were killed. The other thing that was interesting is we did meet with a couple of Republicans who were very thoughtful and did oppose the concealed weapons on campus. One was Joel John from Buckeye, who had been a teacher, and he was opposed to it because he thought it was crazy, and also that the Board of Regents should have supported it if they thought it was a good idea, and they didn't. David Cook from Globe, who's a rancher and was in the military. He was very dismissive about, I think he implied that some of the people in the legislature were gun nuts and that they didn't take into account that in the military, when you have a firearm, you are trained and trained and trained and trained until you can use it properly. And in Arizona, wide open Arizona, there's nothing. Any idiot can get a gun. I mentioned the NRA, the AZCDL, and this year there was a new group of sort of suburban moms called the DC Project who came and talked a lot about needing to defend themselves by carrying guns. And this one woman said she just felt so much better when she took her darling little kindergartner granddaughter to school, that she knew she had a gun with her to defend herself. And I thought, where are you taking your child to school? Is it in the middle of a war zone? Why would you need to defend yourself? I know I'm getting too emotional, but it just makes me so angry. There were some more sympathetic women who talked about needing guns because they had been assaulted and they wanted some protection, but still, I don't think it's a good idea. Finally, I do want to let Marie get in, but there were some, it's just every year there's a steady drip to try to weaken gun safety, and it really is supported by the gun lobby. One of the most ridiculous things I heard in a committee hearing was Senator Sonny Borrelli canvassing his Republican committee members on the Judiciary Committee and asking them, don't they feel that people are more polite when you carry a gun? He said, because he always felt like when he was in the service, people were more polite because they knew everyone was carrying a firearm. And he went around and asked everyone, and Wendy Rogers was on the committee, and actually all she said was yes. She didn't say anything very wacko, but it was really out there. So I think I will stop here. I have some information on federal laws, but I'll let Marie do her presentation.
Okay, so Jeannie, I wasn't sure with your group because I wasn't as familiar with your group previously. Do you guys are you up on all the election stuff already? Do you guys already all know your new LDs and your new congressional districts?
I mean, yeah, we've been talking about it a little bit, so it's confusing, I think, for everybody. I mean, I was just talking to a senator from Arizona, and she was telling me how she was struggling to get them all down. But I would say that the vast majority of our members are aware of redistricting, and I would say perhaps smaller majority of them are aware of what their new districts are.
Okay. Thank you. I just needed to know what that is. Okay, so today I do want to talk about why elections are so important to our work. I want to explain what the Gun Sense Candidate Program is, let you know how to find the list of 75 Arizona Gun Sense candidates so far, and then briefly describe our priorities and our plans. I am going to share my screen, but I just wanted to mention a couple of things before I did that. So first of all, I want to make it clear that every day, 110 people are killed by firearms in the United States, and another 200 are shot. So to me, gun violence prevention is a women's issue because women are 21 times more likely to be killed by a firearm than women in other high-income countries. Gun violence prevention is a civil rights issue because Black Americans are 10 times more likely to be killed by a gun than white Americans. And if we look at Buffalo, for example, guns and racism are a deadly mix. And then most importantly, gun violence prevention is about protecting kids. And I always like to say, and everybody's somebody's kid. So firearms are the leading cause of death of children less than 19 years old in this country. But really, this is preventable. Gun violence is preventable. So more guns is not the answer. I would dispute the comments made by this Senator Borelli that Ann mentioned, because more guns mean more shootings. So I noticed that the promotional material for this talk mentioned that we would discuss how Christian nationalism has become entangled with gun rights. I just want to say a couple things about that. First of all, there's no mention of firearms in the Bible. Are you asking me something, Jeannie? Oh, the only relevant passage, in my opinion, is from the Gospel of Matthew, where Jesus says, "Put up again thy sword into his place, for all those that take up the sword shall perish with the sword." So basically, those that live by the sword die by the sword. To me, that's relevant because, again, more guns mean more shootings. So one of the talking points from those who want to weaken gun safety, and they'll pound their fists when they say it, is that people have a God-given right to own firearms. And at face value, that seems really confusing. Like, why would someone say that when most religious teachings are against murder? But it's true, based on sociological research, that opposition to restriction of firearms in any way, no limits whatsoever, is closely linked to Christian nationalism. And observational data suggests that that's because Christian nationalists believe that the American Constitution is inspired by the Christian God, so that it's almost like a biblical document. So I'm going to try, okay, here we go. I'm going to put a link to an article from Time Magazine into the chat. And in that link, it says, among whites who said America should be a Christian nation, more than 40% named the right to keep and bear arms as the most important right. Not freedom of speech, not even freedom of religion. Gun rights to them is the most important thing. So our contention is that with rights come responsibilities, and polling suggests that the majority of Americans agree that 80% of Americans agree that stronger background checks are important. So, okay, so now I'm going to share my screen. Share. Okay, just making sure it worked all right. And I have to move you guys over so I can see you. Okay, thanks for giving me the time to do that. Okay. So anyway, my point is elections matter, and just one election can make a big difference. So as a story of hope that maybe some of you have heard about, in November of 2019, the Virginia legislature flipped to a gun sense majority. Then in 2020, when those people took office, the following gun sense laws were passed. A red flag law, which is in fancy terms known as the Extreme Risk Protection Order law, background check requirement, a mandate to report lost and stolen firearms, which does not exist in many states, increased penalties for adults who let children get access to guns because they don't safely store their firearms, limits to gun sales such that you could only buy one handgun per month, and then prohibiting individuals who are subject to protective orders or restraining orders from possessing firearms, and then regulation of firearms in public places. There was an eighth bill, which was a ban on assault rifles, that did not pass. So that was very exciting for us and really shows how one election can make a difference. But there was a huge backlash. So far, these laws still stand, but why was there that backlash? Well, to me, it's obvious that a common sense approach to gun safety is the beginning to a solution to America's gun violence problem, or at least that we should try something, because so far we've been trying nothing, and therefore nothing changes. We don't get an effect if we just try nothing. But there was a confirmation bias among many people who disagree with me, and that led them to double down and see any attempts to restrict firearms as an attack on their beliefs and values. So just to put the thing about Christian nationalism, why I'm not going to talk about it further, is because yes, 20% of white Americans embrace Christian nationalism, but our goal is that we would not allow their voices to drown out the majority who do want stronger gun safety laws. Okay, so it does take a few years. So I actually tried to look up like what effect has all these laws had on Virginia so far. And it's so far a very small effect because it does take a few years to see an effect that gun safety laws work. So here, for example, is a statistic that's mentioned frequently. It's Connecticut's firearm homicide rate before and after they passed a permit to purchase law. So basically, this is a law that says, if you want to buy a gun, you have to go through the background check before you obtain it. So this was not enough because Sandy Hook happened in 2012. But in terms of overall homicides, the rate decreased by 40%. The Connecticut's rates, this horizontal line is the before and after. So the rates of homicide in Connecticut did drop by 40%, as shown here by this solid line, compared to all the other states, which is this line at the very top. These researchers, this is a published study, did a computer modeling to look at what Connecticut's homicide rates would be without having passed this law, and that's shown by this dotted line here. Okay, and I will share an article about that is from the mainstream media, but there it is. Okay, so after Sandy Hook, though, Connecticut banned assault weapons. And at this point, there have been no mass shootings in Connecticut since Sandy Hook. And that's just one state. So what if we look at the rest? So if we look at this, so I told you guys I was a retired physician, so I do like published studies. But so I'm just going to show you this study and then I'll move on from overwhelming you with data. So firearms are the leading cause of death in kids in the United States. But this is a peer-reviewed study that shows that states with stronger gun safety laws, which is shown here on the x-axis, stronger laws are further out, have lower rates of firearm-related deaths in children, shown on the y-axis. And the longer these laws were in effect, the stronger the benefit. So the lowest death rates are in states with universal background checks for more than 5 years. So just to drive home the point and show what Anne was referencing before, every town, every town did a comparison between gun loss strength, which is in blue, and gun violence rate in each state. The study could have been done better, in my opinion, because they didn't control for the gun laws in neighboring states, but it is what it is. So it shows here that the gun loss strength rating, is that the gun loss strength weakens, gun violence rate generally increases. So California is number 1 in the country for gun loss strength. And as Anne mentioned, Arizona is number 43. We're listed among the national failures. So we need to do better. And the way that we do that I can see, is elections, because we haven't made good progress in convincing people other than to vote against laws that would weaken our gun safety. So Moms Demand Action, which is under the umbrella of Everytown, has a federal gun sense candidate program. So this is the program for the 2022 elections midterms. So basically this program is the first step in our candidate engagement program. And this award that says you're a gun sense candidate basically signals to the voting public the candidate will govern with gun safety in mind. Jen Longden says it's like just something to check, you check for it to make sure that the candidate cares about this issue. So the gun sense distinction allows a candidate to use the gun sense candidate logo on campaign materials, access messaging and policy guidance to talk about gun violence, and appear as a gun sense champion on gunsensevoter.org. I will say that there's a site that was just put in the chat. Everytown was very ambitious this time. I'm going to send this to everyone. I just realized I don't think I was sending the prior links to everybody. And so they expanded the program, as I said earlier, to down ballot races. That plus redistricting means the gun sense voter website is a little bit of a mess. So it's better if you go to the gunsensevoter.org/candidates website and then filter by Arizona. And then that, of course, if you have the Gun Sense candidate designation, which I know there are people on this call who have it. I saw Stacy Travers, Judy Schreiber, and of course, Jeannie Castine. That's who I saw when I was looking earlier. You earn the support of Moms Demand Action volunteers. So receiving the Gun Sense candidate distinction is separate from, but is a prerequisite to be considered for endorsement by Everytown. So endorsement is just sort of a slightly higher level. And I just want to say, volunteers can have input, but Everytown makes the decision on endorsements. Okay, so why do we have this? Well, first of all, this program kind of encourages and enables Moms Demand Action volunteers to participate and become aware of who's on their ballot. We approach it the same way you might approach giving food to your child, which is you decide what goes on the table and they decide how much they want to eat. So we let people, our volunteers, know, and then they can decide how much they want to engage. We also, this allows us to identify Gun Sense candidates to give us hope. So our original goal was 75. We've met that this week. Our reach goal is 100. Right now we're on track to have 90 Gun Sense candidates by the end of the month, but we are hoping to get a few more. Okay, so what are we dealing with at the general state level? So Mark Kelly needs to run again for US Senate. He is going to be a Gun Sense candidate eventually. He hasn't filled out his survey yet. Then the Arizona Governor, Secretary of State, Attorney General, and Treasurer are all up for election. And so far, every Democrat running for office in these races is a Gun Sense candidate, which we're very happy about. Okay, so redistricting has definitely mixed things up. And I have to tell you that I can't stop myself. I want everybody to know their new legislative district and their new congressional district. So I'm putting the links in the chat for you to be able to enter your address and find out what your new districts are. Because redistricting is kind of, mixing things up for everybody. So here's the map of the new congressional districts, the whole state, and then Phoenix expanded, zoomed in a little bit. And some of the congressional districts look very different. Like I've stared at this map so much that now when I look at District 2, I'm like, look, it looks like a dinosaur head, wrapping around from Flagstaff to Casa Grande. I used to be in District 6, now it's called District 1. So on this map here, I've used the standard colors, red for Republican, blue for Democrat, and then purple for, could go either way, hopefully. If there's a star, that means there's no member of the opposing party running. So District 8 is Debbie Lesko. She doesn't have any opponent. She's already won. District 9 is Paul Gosar. He does have 3 primary opponents, but no opponent from the Democratic Party or independent. Okay, so right now we are on track to have a Gun Sense candidate in all the districts except for 8 and 9. So there's 2 non-competitive Democratic districts, and both of these candidates are Gun Sense candidates. There's 3 non-competitive Republican districts. In CD5, which is where Andy Biggs is running for re-election, the independent Clint Smith and the Democrat Javier Ramos have both submitted their questionnaires. Those are still being decided on by Everytown. And then in the 4 competitive districts, 3 of which lean Republican and 1, I want to say it's CD4 because it is, leans Democratic. There are Gun Sense candidates in all of those districts. Daniel Hernandez, who's a survivor of the Gifford shooting, has been endorsed as well by Everytown. So obviously we want to support maintaining a Democratic majority at the federal level, because right now we have a sitting president who cares about this issue, and we need people in Congress who will work with our Gun Sense president. Okay, and then the new legislative districts, which is a big focus for us, because as Ann said, we are so sick of fighting the same bills year after year after year. So currently, as you all know, the Arizona legislature is at a 1-vote majority in both houses. The redistricting does definitely favor Republican districts. Of the 30 legislative districts, 13 are non-competitive, heavily Republican, and 12 are non-competitive, heavily Democrat. So there's really only 5 competitive districts. I secretly want there to be 6, but in reality, there's probably only 5 competitive districts. So of the 2 chambers, the House of Representatives and the Arizona Senate, the best hope for a progressive flip, or at least just a tie, is probably the House. So this is a map. It's clearly that I made it using like my crap computer skills. And so again, the stars mean there's no opposing person from the opposing party running. So in 6 Republican districts, there's no Democrats running. So definitely 12 Republicans are going to win. And we are a nonpartisan organization, I should say, but in this state, the only people willing to be gun sense candidates this year are Democrats. In past years, that was not true. We had members of both parties, gun sense candidates from both parties. That is not true this year. Okay, and then in 8 Democratic districts, there are no Republicans running, so 16 Democrats will definitely win. There are also 9 Democrats with a 1 candidate strategy, so I put little ones there in blue, and 2 Republicans going for the 1 candidate strategy. And the 1 candidate strategy, to me, from a math standpoint, seems like a good choice in a competitive district. Okay, so here's those 5 competitive districts. We have gun sense candidates in every one, including Judy Schwiebert, Jeannie Castine in LD2, Laura Tarek and Christine Marsh in LD4, and they will, all 4 of them will be speaking at our meeting on June 29th, which will be at the Paradise Valley Community Center at 6:30. Putting that out there. Also LD9, LD13, and LD16 are the other competitive districts. So, okay. So it'll be down to these 5 districts. All of these districts then are a very high priority for us. And the 1 candidate strategy is really the hope here. So if you look at the non-competitive districts for the House, we would have 26 Republicans and win and 24 Democrats win in all probability. If these 2 candidates in LD9, Lorena Austin will be a gun sense candidate. She just, her questionnaire was submitted late. It'll be 26-26. So then if the single shot candidates in 2, 4, 13, and 16 win, we could at least get to a 30-30 tie, which would at least provide a hope to stop bad bills and maybe force people to work across the aisle. Okay, in the Senate, if voting follows past distribution, it'll end up as 17 Republican to 13 Democrat. I really, really hope that in this district that's very close, that Christine Marsh will be able to beat Nancy Barto. And I also have a secret hope that JD Mesnard would also lose. Don't know if that's realistic or not. Okay, so then just to mention some of the other districts. So in the 13 non-competitive Republican districts, as Ann mentioned, Dana Almond, who's endorsed, and Brian Radford, who's also a gun sense candidate, are running an LD17. That is 8% spread towards Republicans, so it's a tiny bit closer. And then in the 12 non-competitive Democratic districts, we have many gun sense candidates. But Jen Longden, who is a survivor, and then Aaron Marquez, AJ Kurtoglu, and Nancy Gutierrez, who are all longstanding moms volunteers, have all been endorsed. There probably will be other endorsements, but every town just starts by endorsing moms volunteers or survivors to start with, and then they look at the races more closely. Okay, so far we have 40 gun sense candidates in races for Arizona House and 13 for Arizona Senate. And again, you can find those at the gunsensevoter.org. I'm not going to read them all. We are on track to have gun sense candidates in every district except for 15, 25, 27, 28, and 30. But local races matter too. So Julie Gunnigal is a high priority for us, as are school district candidates, and school safety is one of our top issues. So far, these are the local gun sense candidates that we've endorsed. More are on the way. All right, so returning to our goals, this is my wish list. Flip the Arizona governor, attorney general, and secretary of state to gun sense leadership. Elect a gun sense majority, although honestly, I would be ecstatic if there was a tie and even one Arizona chamber. And those 5 competitive districts have to be our priority. And then elect gun sense candidates to priority local offices. This has made a big difference in our work already based on past elections. So what we're asking everyone to do, our supporters, everyone in Arizona, is to vote, but then also relational organizing. So there is definitely data that shows that relational organizing works great because you've already established that trust and rapport with people. So we're asking people to tell at least 5 friends about the Gun Sense Voter website and about Gun Sense candidates. We also, Anne is heading up this effort with 2 other volunteers here in Phoenix, but we also have groups in Tucson and Flagstaff, sending out weekly emails to notify interested volunteers of opportunities to volunteer for those priority gun sense candidates. We can only advertise public facing events because every town follows essentially the strictest campaign finance laws that they can find in the country because they don't want anything to threaten their 501c4 standing. We're also doing educational tabling. So how do you help 100 people at once? You go out and table for all of them at the same time. So we're going out and encouraging people to vote and asking them about their plan to vote. We're asking people to vote the entire ballot and know their new districts. And we're talking about gun violence prevention and the Gun Sense voter website. We will be at First Fridays. We were at the March for Our Lives. We will be at other events through November. We're also sending notifications to all our supporters about everything I just said. We are inviting statewide candidates to our big statewide meetings and inviting our local candidates to local group meetings. There's rules around that, but we'll be able to hear from them. And then we have this idea to do an election season of action calendar with daily actions between August 2nd and November 8th. We're open to other ideas. So if you want to let me know, you can. Hey, Diane, I actually have, oh, maybe it's for the other thing. I might not have it for this. Okay. So then our calls to action. So we use Linktree. So this is the QR code for that. And then we also have, I'll put it in the chat as well. Of course, I have to type it because I didn't. Okay, so I update our Linktree every week, and so we always have our ongoing calls to action. We have an Arizona Moms election meeting on June 23rd, and because of the increased media attention around this issue, we have over 300 people signed up. How many will actually show? Who knows? And our next Phoenix local group meeting is, as I said, June 29th at the PB Community Center, where we'll be hearing from Gun Sense candidates. And that's a hybrid meeting. So if you wanted to join by Zoom, you could also do it that way. So if you ever want to talk elections, you can email me at this email, marie.az.moms@gmail.com. And that's kind of it. Okay, let me stop sharing my screen. Okay, so I am open to any questions or discussion.
Well, and we do have a question coming from the audience. There's a link to an article that I'll go ahead and put in the chat. But the question comes from Howard, and he says, what is Moms Demand Action's position on the 2018 Florida law that seems to compromise with strong red flag laws, but also permits certain select teachers with firearms competence vetted by their school district to function as a kind of backup security in the event of an attack Could this be a compromise measure that Arizona can adopt?
Okay, so my focus is mostly on Arizona, but I do know that the Florida moms have worked at the school board level to try to stop arming teachers and having guns in schools. The reasoning, and I get it, if people are super trained, maybe they could protect someone. But the reality is, and Sheriff Penzone talks about this a lot, is that when police officers go through training to become undercover agents, one of the things they spend a lot of time doing is what to do when uniformed police enter and you're in plain clothes. So unless teachers are going through that same 6-month training, it's not a good idea, because what happens? The uniformed police enter, they're hyped up, and they see someone in plain clothes with a gun. They're going to shoot first and ask questions later. And this has happened. So that's number one. We don't want the teacher to end up shot. Number two, we don't want the teacher to have to shoot a student. That sounds horrible. Number three, what happens if a depressed or untreated child with untreated mental illness finds that gun or gets access to that gun when the teacher has to step out of the room or whatever? That could lead to bad effects. So there are places, I want to say it's Oklahoma, the state definitely starts with an O, where like a chemistry teacher had a gun, because that was allowed, and ended up shooting himself in the leg accidentally during class because he hit the gun wrong. So then now there's a whole classroom of children who are traumatized by that. And it did not have the desired effect. The truth is I get it. When these horrible school shootings happen, there's a lot of media attention, but the reality is that, okay, in our nation, schools are actually relatively safe compared to other places. On the other hand, if we compare our schools to, say, schools in Scotland, it's a disaster. That's the problem. But again, more guns basically just lead to more shootings, more accidental shootings, theft of guns. So in my viewpoint, the best way, and I would say this is true for Moms Demand Action in general, the best way to stop a bad guy with a gun is to make sure he never got it in the first place.
Yeah, we kind of saw that argument of, we just need more good guys with guns. But in Uvalde, Texas, all the good guys with guns were out in the parking lot for over an hour, while families could hear their school being shot up. So that argument kind of goes out the window. Last week, when Senator Quesada introduced a bill and there was debate over it, immediately there was this pivot to, oh, we need to arm teachers. Oh, we need more prayer in schools. This is because of the atheists and the secular humanists. And, this is because of people providing abortions. And this is because of LGBTQ youth. And now this week, they seem to have really honed in and focused on that LGBTQ. And I feel like it's just smoke and mirrors, because suddenly now we're talking about drag story hours and equating it to child abuse, rather than actually talking about the violence in our country and the easy access to guns. It's infuriating.
Agreed. And there was an SRO at Parkland as well that wasn't able to stop that shooting. And actually, John Oliver did a segment on Sunday, either this past Sunday or the Sunday before, on SROs that was actually, sometimes he's silly, but it was very well done.
Yeah, and how that leads to students of color often just going into the so-called school to prison pipeline. But just as Marie said, the more guns, the less safe things are. And I think I don't have statistics, but I think it's been proven over and over that it's very difficult for a good guy with a gun to figure out to go in and save the day. It's happened a few times, but I think even in the Gifford shooting, there was a good guy who had a gun who went running toward it. And he almost would have shot some of the people who were trying to subdue the real bad guy. So it generally is not a good idea.
And yeah, I mean, the fact that we have such easy access, no wait time. I mean, you have to, you know, when you turn 15 and a half, you have to practice driving for 6 months. You know, I think it's a good idea for people to have some kind of certification and training that that's actually recordable, to make sure that they know how to safely handle guns. And again, this is all to me, and obviously to the both of you, just common sense. And unfortunately, because of the gun lobby and because of the capitalists who make money off of guns, it's become a political issue. And, you know, schools should be safe places. And instead, parents are now worried every time they drop their kids off to school. I mean, I was worried going to the Capitol the other day because, you know, there are a bunch of mostly young white men there, you know, not just carrying one gun, but several. And we're talking AR-15s. And the AR-15 is really designed, it's a high capacity rifle, right? To murder people. It's not for deer hunting. It's not for shooting birds. And some of the stories that came out of Uvalde and the condition of those children, you know, literally just blown to pieces. It was a really tough couple of weeks. You know, it's been a tough time. And so to see it politicized is incredibly frustrating for me, and I'm sure incredibly frustrating for you. So I have put up all of your links onto our Facebook discussion here. I appreciate you. And I wonder, would you be able to perhaps share your slideshows? Even just the slides with the congressional maps might be helpful. So if that's something that you want to follow up with us, I think that our members would really like to have access. For those who don't know what their congressional or legislative districts are and who those candidates are, that would be something really helpful for us if you're willing to share. Oh, good.
Okay, I just put it in the chat. Okay.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. Well, you know, we usually end about 1 o'clock. We've gone just a little bit over time. I want to thank Anne and Marie for showing up. And you don't just show up here. I see the two of you showing up everywhere, and not just when it's concerning gun regulations and common sense gun laws. So thank you for your activism. I liked your homemade maps. I thought they were great. So keep them coming. And real quick, I think Lindsay's going to put on the screen what we have coming up next. So some of our upcoming events that we have, let's see. Let me go ahead and share my screen now. Oh, wait. Or maybe Lindsay's going to do it. I'm going to let Lindsay do that. But I can tell you right off the bat that we have coming up, I think it's next week, June 22nd. And that is a Wednesday night. Wednesday night, we're going to have the Washington Elementary School District Governing Board Candidate Forum. I believe this is our 5th now. We are seeing, you know, kind of white Christian nationalism playing out in our local school boards. So we wanted to focus on that so voters know who the candidates are to vote for. We also, on June 28th, which is a Tuesday at 12 p.m., we have Heather Weaver, who is the senior staff attorney with the ACLU program on freedom of religion and belief, on implications of the SCOTUS decision coming down from Kennedy versus Bremerton. That is the one about prayer on the football field. And then I believe, I don't want to get the dates wrong, but I believe it's July 7th. We also just scheduled our Deer Valley Unified School District Governing Board Forum. And then if you go to that link, there are a whole bunch of other choices for you from Arizona End of Life Options. We have some from the Humanist Society. So all kinds of great programming happening here. We're seeing it more and more, this threat of white Christian nationalism. We have folks who are in elected positions who are actually at the Capitol during the insurrection, one of whom is running completely unopposed. And then a couple more who are also running unopposed. So it's really important to stay on top of these issues, and Secular AZ is your voice for the separation of church and state in Arizona, and we have been since 2010. So get involved with us, get involved with Moms Demand Action. Thank you again to Marie and Ann, and we will see you next week, everybody. Have a great day and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.